Hello, you are watching News Mongolia on MNB World. I am your host, Jugdir Gambold. And from our top stories, interest rates of bonds decreased from 11 to 13% to 8. Air ticket prices for domestic regional flights should be reduced. The legal environment constrains citizens' freedom of speech. For the news, stay tuned. At a cabinet meeting held this week, the Ministry of Finance Jahlang indicated that a new 5-year USD bond was successfully issued and traded to refinance the Girgen Horlta bonds.
Thanks to the many months of efforts and preparations, we received orders worth $4 billion from 138 investors within one day. As a result, we managed to decrease that 11 to 12% interest rates of Girge and Horlta bonds, which amounted to $650 million to 8%.
When the interest rate of the U.S. Federal Reserve was 1%, the Girge and Horlta bonds were issued with interest rates of 5.7% and 8.75% respectively.
We have managed to issue our bonds at adequate interest rates amid the trend of Asian capital flowing into the U.S. market. It demonstrated the positive evaluation, attitude and trust of foreign investors towards our government's performance, he added.
According to the minister, domestic banks of Mongolia hold 10 to 15% of the total foreign bonds. For this time, domestic banks also made significant contributions to successful trading by purchasing the bond with equal amounts to the bond they already held. Moreover, the joint efforts of the Bank of Mongolia and the Minister of Economy and Development successfully resulted in the achievement of the foreign exchange reserves of Mongolia to increase to $3.4 billion.
The government of Mongolia has announced that 2023 to 2025 as the years to visit Mongolia in order to boost its tourism sector. Many foreign tourists visiting Mongolia usually go to rural and remote areas with unique natural sightseeing places or with intangible nomadic cultural heritage. Therefore, tour companies and industry experts note the importance of decreasing the tariff for domestic regional flights.
Domestic regional flights are operated to Qavalta, Hovd, Bayolgi, and Huvskal provinces. As those provinces are located quite remotely, domestic flights are also in demand among locals. However, due to the high tariff of local flights, citizens usually have to choose more cost-friendly options such as train, bus, or car. 875,000 or almost 1 million Mongolian Turks for domestic regional 1-2-hour flight is too expensive. The price should be reduced.
It's very expensive. It should be decreased.
One of the domestic air carriers operating flights to the region is Air Mongolia. In 2019, the company transported 59,000 passengers, of which 20% were foreign visitors. In 2022, this number rose to 149,000 and 30,000 of which were local passengers. The air carrier companies operated with an average 8 billion Mongolian Turks lost during the 2020-2021 pandemic period. Therefore, domestic air carriers expressed the need for state's policy support in order to reduce any tariffs.
The cost of operating a flight to Hovd province is about 45 million MNT. If we fly fully booked in both directions, we can make around 50 million MNT. The major part of the cost is made up from taxes and duties collected from Genghis Khan Airport. The state can support the air carrier by providing a tax discount, which will reduce the cost and consequently the tariff for passengers.
In 2012, 250,000 passengers used domestic air carrier services operated to regional areas. In 2022, only 33,000. We have contacted the Ministry of Road and Transport Development for clarification. by establishing a contract with local governors, a subsidy of 250 million and up to 2.6 billion Mongolian tugreks from regional budget is provided to air carriers so they can operate flights 3 times a week and transport around 43,000 passengers. Domestic airports operate with subsidies from the Civil Aviation Authority of Mongolia. In 2023, we are planning to exempt domestic airports from VAT. Hunu Air and Aero Mongolia domestic air carriers used to operate flights to 9 directions. However, now they operate only 2 flights per week to Hoft and Bayodli province. Therefore, domestic air carriers need support to increase their operations. Support could be in the form of reducing fuel prices and eventually decreasing ticket prices for domestic passengers.
Freedom of the press or freedom of the media is the fundamental principle that communication and expression through various media, including printed and electronic media, especially published materials, should be considered a right to be exercised freely. However, journalists and media experts say that in Mongolia, journalists cannot fully exercise their right to source confidentiality.
The current active legal environment of Mongolia limits the right of journalists for source of confidentiality. Source confidentiality, or reporter's privilege, as it is called in the USA, is a right given to journalists under the laws of many countries, as well as under international law. It prohibits authorities, including the courts, from compelling a journalist to reveal the identity of anonymous source of a story. The right is based on a recognition that without a strong guarantee of anonymity, many would be deterred from coming forward and sharing information of public interest with journalists. There are not strong enough legal environment and regulations in Mongolia that protect and support freedom of press, safety and security of journalists, source of confidential information. Eventually, it breaches public rights to receive many-sided, independent and unbiased information. There are very few cases when the right for information is limited, for example, if it compromises national security, defense, and international relations or public safety. Member states may limit the right of access to official documents. Limitations should be set down precisely in the law about in which cases limitations can occur. The legal code's part on spreading false information itself in some cases limits people's freedom of expression, so we can conclude that the legal environment is quite limiting. The Press Institute of Mongolia, journalists and legal specialists agree that the legal environment is not fully meeting the demands for citizens' freedom of speech, and note that further attention should be paid to this issue at the policy-making level.
Now let's look at the currency exchange rates provided by the Central Bank of Mongolia. Welcome back. You've been with News Mongolia on MNB World. Now here comes foreign news partnered with international news agencies. European Parliament's leaders on Thursday discussed the measures to prevent corruption and former lawmakers from lobbying on behalf of businesses or governments. The institution is still dealing with a major corruption scandal involving a member of parliament.
European Parliament President Roberta Metsola and European Parliament political groups' presidents met to discuss measures and actions to be taken, which will be presented by Metsola next week. This meeting comes just a month after Belgian authorities arrested 4 people on charges of corruption, money laundering, and participation in a criminal organization. Lawmakers and officials concede that it may be the biggest corruption scandal to have hit the European Union. Those charged include a member of the parliament, Eva Kaili, and her boyfriend, Francesco Giorgi, an assistant there. They are accused of working with former EU lawmaker Pier Antonio Panzeri, who, according to an arrest warrant, is suspected of intervening politically with members working at the European Parliament for the benefit of Qatar and Morocco against payment. Belgian justice authorities also want Parliament to lift the immunity of two other serving EU lawmakers, Italian Andrea Cozzolino and Belgian Marc Tarabella. Both deny involvement. The fourth person currently facing charges is Nicola Figa Talamanca, head of the charity group No Peace Without Justice. The corruption scandal hit the spotlight as Qatar hosted the Soccer World Cup. The small, energy-rich Gulf nation has seen its international profile rise as Doha used its massive offshore natural gas fields to make the country one of the world's richest per capita and to power its regional political ambitions. The EU Assembly has halted work on files involving Qatar as it investigates what impact the cash and gifts for influence bribery scandal might have had. Qatar and Morocco deny involvement.
Day by day.
Ukraine's Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar said on Thursday that heavy fighting is taking place in the eastern city of Soledar. Russia continues the assaults, but suffers significant losses and is not successful. Maliar said at a news briefing in Kiev.
Soledar's fall, while unlikely a turning point in the nearly 11-month war, would be a prize for a Kremlin start of good battlefield news in recent months. It would also offer Russian troops a springboard to conquer other areas of Donetsk province that remain under Ukrainian control, such as the nearby strategic city of Bakhmut.
Наші захисники продовжують.
Our defenders continue to hold their positions on the most difficult front lines and in the battle for the Donbass. Today, fierce and heavy battles continue in the direction of Bakhmut in the area of Soledar city. Despite the difficult situation, Ukrainian soldiers are fighting desperately. The enemy is suffering heavy losses, unsuccessfully trying to break through our defenses and capture Soledar. Today, the city's approaches are literally littered with the bodies of Putin's destroyed troops. Nevertheless, they move over the bodies of their fallen fighters. Our defenders show maximum resilience and heroism.
По тілах своїх загиблих бійців.
Senior military commander Alexei Khromov described the latest shakeup in the Russian military as a sign of poor performance. In an apparent recognition of battlefield setbacks, Russia's defense ministry announced the replacement of the head of Russian forces in Ukraine. The former chief was demoted to deputy after 3 months on the job, signaling that Russian President Vladimir Putin wasn't fully satisfied with his performance.
Now let's take a look at the regular feature on sports. Lionel Messi is the overwhelming favorite to win the Best FIFA Men's Player of the Year award after the nominations were announced on Thursday.
Lionel Messi captained Argentina to glory in the World Cup final as they eventually beat France on penalties following an enthralling 3-3 draw. PSG teammate Kylian Mbappe, who scored a hat-trick in the game, is also on the list together with his French international teammate Karim Benzema. Benzema, who won the Ballon d'Or for the first time in his career in October last year, helped Real Madrid seal the Champions League following victory over Liverpool in June. Luka Modric is also nominated alongside goal-scoring Premier League duo Erling Haaland and Mohamed Salah. Other nominees include Neymar, Vinicius Jr., Julian Alvarez, Robert Lewandowski, Sadio Mane, Kevin De Bruyne, Achraf Hakimi, and Jude Bellingham. Argentina head coach Lionel Scaloni and Champions League winner Carlo Ancelotti are among the nominations for the Best FIFA Coach of the Year award after the nominations were announced on Thursday. Scaloni ended Argentina's 36-year wait to lift the World Cup following the penalty shootout victory over France following a memorable 3-3 draw. Ancelotti led Real Madrid to the Champions League and La Liga double, while Didier Deschamps narrowly missed out on back-to-back World Cup trophies following defeat in the final. Walid Regragui, who took Morocco to the World Cup semi-finals, completes the list together with English Premier League champion Pep Guardiola.
Lack of snow isn't the only challenge on these slopes as Europe's ski season gets underway. Inflation and economic constraints have meant higher prices for those wanting to sample Austria's white slopes.
This was the scene at the Austrian resort at Vilsmos in early January, with skiers resigned to drifting down a single slope as record temperatures melted most of the region's snow. The United Nations World Meteorological Organization has long warned about the ill effects of climate change and said the last 8 years have been the 8th hottest on record. The fallout this winter hasn't been limited to snowless slopes, where mid-range altitudes have been affected most of all. Weather officials and scientists say flora and fauna are feeling the impact too. At high altitudes, skiers have returned to the Arlberg, a mountainous region in western Austria, between Tyrol and Vorarlberg, home to one of Europe's top ski areas. With coronavirus restrictions lifted and no need to wear a mask on lifts as in previous winter seasons, skiers are flocking back to ski Arlberg.
The changes with COVID, as well as just the way that the economy has changed completely, it has had an impact on our travel and some of the choices we've made. But also because this is a special trip, some things we're not thinking about money for. But most of the time, yeah, inflation is an impact. It has stopped us doing some things we wanted to do.
In a report released on December 20, 2022, economists at the Austrian Institute of Economic Research said the outlook for winter 2022-2023 is affected by high inflation, but cautious optimism seems appropriate. It also found that spikes in energy prices and the upsurge in inflation were increasingly influencing the tourism industry, affecting hotel businesses and guests alike. While holidaymakers are looking to save on their vacations, destinations that have specialized in high-income groups of guests could thus come through the crisis better, the report said.
Now let's look at the weather forecast for the world's major cities. Well, that's all for today. Thank you for staying tuned. We'll see you next time with more news and updates. Have a good day.